Hello, everybody. Ella J here for a Wrestling Gal, and today I am joined by your Australian Women's Champion, Layla Divine. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am so happy to be talking with you on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. They can't keep us apart. I am so happy to be speaking with you here today. You have such an infectious energy, so I'm so excited to be chatting with you.
I am too. Like it's been a dream of mine to obviously have a chat with you since I first started wrestling. So
Well, thank you. The Australian scene, I mean, I'm sure you could tell the Australian scene is like a second home to me, even though I've never been there. I have such a soft heart, spot in my heart for you gals. So I'm so excited. Like we said, you are the current Australian Women's Champion for STW after you dethroned the long reigning Harley Hyde in December. So I want to firstly go back to that moment. It's kind of full circle, which we'll get to in a minute. But take us back to that moment. How did it feel winning this amazing title, dethroning one of your people you look up to, and all of that?
it was it was a lot to take in, like emotional. Just because my relationship with Harley, we've trained together from the beginning when she first started. So to have that moment of, I guess, not so much finishing a story, but like a
Yeah.
chapter. Um, it was very like emotional. I can't explain it. Like I'm even getting emotional about it now. Yeah.
I feel like I have to point out too, though, in 2023, you won the Future Legend Award for
Yeah.
STW. Now, fast forward like a year, actually, technically less than a year because it was before 2024 was up. You are a current legend now and the champion in the same promotion. So I have to imagine, like I said, it's kind of full circle, a significant moment for you.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like I think about like the journey that I had beginning wrestling. I didn't think that, 2, 3 years into my like journey, I'd be a champion. So yeah, it's very rewarding just to have a look back on like those little achievements and you know, I don't know what the future's going to hold, but I'm excited for it. So
Well, let's talk about the future for a minute because, yeah, like you said, you don't know what it's hold. I'm sure, I mean, naturally, you have a target on your back. There's a lot of girls wanting to, eyeing that title, I have to imagine. So, what are your goals for this reign? What do you hope to accomplish in it?
for me, I want to be able to put Australian women's wrestling on the map. Especially like being in Perth, we're so isolated. So like we don't have many like opportunities as to
Yeah.
oppose someone over east. Um, like yeah, I think it's just more so like encouraging and inspiring the next generation and just bringing up that to continue here. So
I'm so curious because I mean I've chatted with talent all across Australia, Queensland, Adelaide, Sydney, Perth. I have heard the same thing. I know, I mean, you're very familiar with Lena Cross. She was in Perth for
of
a
course.
while. There, she left because, like you said, it was so kind of isolated from the rest of the country. So, I mean, I know you're still early in your career. Have you found that to be a bit challenging? And do you see yourself like envisioning like maybe branching out to other opportunities or potentially moving similarly to she did? Or are you kind of just in the now, in the moment?
I'm in the now. I think my main goal, like here,
Hmm.
especially being in Perth, is just growing the scene. I
Yeah.
mean, at the moment at the School of Pro Wrestling where I train, EPW, we've got a few girls coming through, and it's actually really like rewarding to see, you know, just the scene growing since I started. Like, yes, I can move to another state, but Perth is always going to be home.
Yeah.
So I can't, I feel like my goals is just to, just get us grounded here before I start like thinking about my future elsewhere.
Yeah. I get that. And you've said before that you're like very community oriented, and even just in our messages last year, I mean, I guess I'll pull back behind the curtain. You were part of my women's International Women's Day last year collaboration. You shouted out a bunch of girls kind of in the Perth area. So I kind of wanted to talk about the community around you a little bit. Starting with Zenith, who you not only can call a tag team partner, but also a coach of yours, a 14-year veteran. How has your experience been working with him in both aspects?
So Hayden, yes, he's one of my coaches. But yeah, like having like a few matches with him over the past, I don't know, 2, 3 years has been
Yeah,
a blessing. He's really driving just the women within Perth. So we've at the moment at the school of EPW, we've got Saturday sessions happening at the moment. So he's driving that behind the scenes alongside Stella Nix and James Hartness. So like just to have that sense of like support underneath us, it's really going to be interesting to see what happens like going forward. Zenith, I don't think I can thank him enough for all his efforts, especially not for myself, but everyone else
yeah.
within our like team. So
What specific things have you learned from training and or teaming with Zenith? I mean, like I said, he's a 14-year pro, a coach. He has all the experience. What have you learned from him or taken away?
For me, it's just patience. He's very down to earth. And he always reminds me, like, even though like I've had a few setbacks myself, injury wise, he's
Yeah.
always, that, your time will come, your time will come. Like, he's always been in my corner. So I can't, thank him enough for everything that he's done for me.
And I know last year you mentioned somebody who I admittedly wasn't too aware of, that being the queen of Australian wrestling, Michelle. So I was very happy to learn more about her. I know you view her as a prominent figure and an inspiration. So tell us about her impact on you and Australian wrestling.
So before I got involved within the wrestling scene, I saw a match with her, Izzy Shaw, and Roxy for the first time ever. And I was like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for Michelle, I don't think I would have taken the leap of, like, if she can do it, I can do it too.
Yeah.
Um, it's just like she's like a motherly figure to me. I always look up to her. And what she's done for, putting her years. I think she's been involved with wrestling for like 22, 23 years. So
Wow.
that's
Yeah.
that's a long time. I'm like 29. So like,
Mhm.
it's
I'm
for me, she's
27, so she's basically been wrestling my whole our entire lives. Yeah.
yeah, but like, she's just put in the groundwork. And like I think about like for women that like the women that have like been and gone, like if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have what I have now, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah.
So it's like I can't speak highly enough for her and what she's doing at Dude, Where's My Ring?
It's so cool because I mean, I obviously know a lot of the figures going in, but I've talked with people in the past, and but I feel like Australia, as big of a country as it is, the exposure is like just not there on a grand level. And but there's so many amazing talents, like you mentioned Stella Nix. Obviously, we talked about Harley, Lizzie. There are so
Yep.
many amazing talents in Perth, even just little old Perth. So tell us about some of working with those talents. Who else inspires you or empowers you within the Aussie community?
So Zaria, um, she's doing her thing in WWE now.
Yes.
But I was very fortunate enough to, train with her at one
Yeah.
stage when just before I debuted. And then also have a match with her last year,
Yeah, in
during Global
March. Yeah.
Conference. Yeah, well, this time last year, essentially.
Yeah.
So, yeah, she's been a big inspo. people that I meet, like Tessa Armstrong, like I've had a match with her, amazing person, like Little Mars as well, Leah Lovegrove, like these women that I've come across during the EPW winter camps and camps in general, like they inspire me to get better. We're so different that we always bring something to the table and challenge the way we think, the way we act. Like it's just amazing just to be surrounded by women that inspire you.
I feel like that's especially, I mean, it's in some places, wrestling is an inherently selfish business. So there can be, I mean, I don't know how it is in Australia, but I know in the States it sometimes can get a little catty, backstage politics and stuff. So I am very happily refreshed to learn that at least Perth, there's a good community there because you're all working together at the end of the day. It makes it easier for everybody. Like, why would you not want to lift each other up?
Yeah, and like I'm a firm believer, like you're not gonna get anything by tearing each other down.
Yeah.
In this industry, like, yes, it's a very self-serving industry, but in order
Yeah.
to like bring something to the table for your fans or like the show, you need to be able to play to each other's strengths. But you're not going to get anything like from, talking badly about someone because you didn't get your way or like it's just yeah, you need to be able to, especially being a female in a male dominant sport, like it's not easy. Like
Not at all. I mean, across the board, broadcaster wise, referee wise, ring announcing, wrestling in the ring, it's an, like you said, inherently male dominated sport. And you mentioned before earlier, Michelle was obviously huge and kind of shaping and driving you to want to pursue wrestling. But I know when you started, you kind of set out to prove yourself and silence your doubts, as you said. So, I'm curious, what exactly did you want to prove about yourself once you took that leap that you mentioned?
for me, it was like when I was growing up, it was very much I had to stick to a certain criteria because I was a girl.
Yeah,
Um, I just wanted to prove a point that just because of my gender or like my size, like it shouldn't matter. Like I'm not the fittest person, but you know, I like to think that I can challenge myself enough to achieve what I put my mind to. And, with wrestling, it's very much if you're 110% in or you're not. Like it's like people know when you're, cutting corners or like
yeah.
not investing in the time and stuff like that. So,
Now, in that 2, 3 years that we were mentioning so far in your journey, would you say that you've silent? I mean, I know it's a process. We're all our own worst critics, so I have to imagine there's still everybody has doubts every now and then. But what would you say? Would you say you've widely silenced those internal doubts so far?
so far I have, but there's always, when you're put in like certain positions, you're
Yeah.
constantly learning. So it's like I think it's if you've got to look at it in the sense of like you're growing, right? So like when I first started, I didn't really talk to anyone. Like I was very much in my shell. And now like, going out and performing, it's like one of the best things in the world. Like despite, like how many times I'm like, oh, I'm not good enough. I still go
Yeah.
out and do it. Like
Yeah, it kind of forces you to like push yourself outside of your comfort zone because you're performing in front of all these people, and there's like psychology, obviously there's in-ring work, there's promos, there's character work. You kind of have to be a little bit outgoing in the ring. So I'm curious then from that aspect, besides like coming out of your shell more and maybe confidence wise, how else do you think you've grown as a person and as a competitor these last 3-ish years?
um that's a good question. How do I think? I honestly think I've grown a lot. A good story that I always talk about is how in real life, Harley and I never really got along. Like
Hmm.
we just at each other's head, like, butting heads all the time. And I turned to her one show after my match, and I turned to her and I said, "What are we doing?" And she's like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Well, we're at each other's throats all the time, and I really want to see you succeed." And I think that was a very good pivotal point in our relationship
Yeah.
where, you know, I was like, "Hey, we're in it together. Um, we should be supporting each other." And like for me, like back then, like when I first started, it was like, "Oh, I'm just in it to get booked," like not thinking about anyone else, but like
Yeah.
having a point in that like relationship with her, I was like, we have to be to like do this together, otherwise it's not going to work. Yeah, it's a good like memory that I have with her, and like as I said, when we've trained together for so long, so doing this, story over 18 months, it was sort of like, wow, like
It's not often that you get stories drawn out that much. I mean, granted, it's more likely on the indies because you have more creative freedom, but I feel like it's extremely rare to have like a lengthy storyline, especially in women's wrestling, man.
yeah, like when you think about it, you do. It's like it's different, but like I think for the both of us, it's brought us to that level where we're like but more understanding of
Yeah.
what's expected, like especially because we're still fairly new on the scene. Like 2 3 years isn't much in comparison to someone else that's been in the business for 10 years, like Stella Nix.
Yeah.
So it's like you've got to think about it, like I think about it that way. It's a growth journey together, and yeah, it's sort of setting the pathway for like future.
Yeah, we're talking about the future, but earlier you mentioned your kind of growing up and all of that, how you said you didn't feel like you didn't maybe conform to gender standards and all of that. I'm so curious. If you think back to younger Layla, your younger self, what did the little version of you envision yourself doing for a career when she got older? Was it always wrestling, or did you envision yourself going down another path in life?
um It wasn't always wrestling. Wrestling was it just sort of happened. Like I just
Yeah.
thought I need to do it. I always wanted to be a vet. But I remember when I was in like school, my teacher said, "Nah, just quit. You're not gonna make it." Like, yeah, yeah. So yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how to explain. But I'm a firm believer in everything happens for a reason, and I wouldn't change
Mhm.
it. I wouldn't change it.
Now I have to ask because I noticed this at the beginning of the interview, and I don't know if you know this already, but I'm also a big Randy Orton fan. Like,
Yes,
I
my
don't know
man.
if you wore that purposely or not. Okay.
Favorite t-shirt.
Because I feel like I should have worn mine now. Um, I love him. Like he is one of my early day ones. Actually, he was a heel. So I don't know where your fandom with him began. I started watching during he was in like Prime Legacy. Didn't I was still young, didn't know what kayfabe, so I obviously booed him for like the first year. But then like 2010, like a Evolution of a Predator came out, and like I started liking him throughout 2010 after Legacy kind of broke up. So I've been a fan ever since. So I have to ask, like, we're gonna gush over Randy Orton. When did your fandom of him begin?
Oh, like the day that I saw him. No, I love him as a wrestler. Like he's
Yeah.
just perfect. Like even like I know that he's like, typical like boy crush when you're
Yeah,
when you're a kid.
absolutely.
But like his style of wrestling and his movement, it's just like you just don't see him coming. Like
Well, I
I
mean, it
love
is
him.
an RKO out of nowhere.
I know, right? But just the way that he
Yeah,
stalks and just the little things that I just, I can't compare it to anyone else. So,
I agree. He's definitely like top five, top six of all time for me. Like he's still
right?
going strong. Um,
exactly. When I saw him at Elimination Chamber, I was like,
yeah, yeah. Oh my God, that was a fun time. I was there at his return in Chicago at Survivor Series and
yeah.
just at this past Elimination Chamber. So those were both really fun, like full circle. How was your experience? Obviously, that's right. We mentioned not getting a lot of exposure. Perth got a lot of exposure
Oh,
when Elimination Chamber came there. So how was your experience attending the event?
oh, amazing. I think I was just so like overwhelmed because we just had like a massive weekend. So I believe that we had the EPW Super Show the
Yeah,
night before, and just like seeing everyone literally from Australia, like I was like, oh my God, like mind blown. Like I went to PWA a couple years ago just for some training. So like some of the wrestlers that were in Perth, they're like, "Oh my God, you're here!" I was like,
yeah,
"Yeah." And then on the day of the actual Elimination Chamber, Dude, Where's My Ring was hosting their show throughout the day beforehand.
yeah.
So when I got to Elimination Chamber, I was like so like overwhelmed but like excited.
Mhm.
So good. Loved it.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, you got to watch another Australian Rhea Ripley main event. How is it
Um,
piecing people? You mentioned Zaria now in NXT. Obviously there's like Bronson Reed. Nia Jax is technically Australian, even though like she's also Samoan. How is it seeing like some Aussies making some big moves in pro wrestling, like live in person too?
Oh, it's amazing. It's very heartwarming. Like I don't know, it's just the fact that, they've come from Australia and like obviously like my coaches know them or
Yeah.
people who know. It's kind of like if they like I don't know, it's just I'm lost for words. Like about time. We're so underrated.
I know there's so many freaking amazing talents and obviously I mean I don't know maybe it's delayed but I mean just personally I know there was a bunch of people at the Australian tryout that same weekend as far as I know the only one we've seen so far come out of that is Zaria Delta. I am like surprised that there was not more unless they're like delayed like moving over or something. I was surprised there's not more like coming out of there because there's so many freaking amazing talents there. Ugh,
I know, it's crazy. I was hoping that Lena would get signed, but
yeah.
she's doing her own thing. Like she's got Japan, like
She's got a
she's
world
living her
tour.
best
She's gonna
life.
be in Vegas next month from what I saw. So like ugh. Oh well hopefully, sometimes you gotta make your own opportunities and Lena Cross is surely doing that. Um
Yeah, that's it. You've just got to like the world's your oyster at the end of the day.
mhm,
You put in what you want out of it. Like sometimes if you gotta go overstates to get noticed, then go
mhm.
overstates. It's like what Julian Ward did. Like
Yeah.
amazing. Now he's back, and it's like we're learning from him after his experiences,
Mhm.
and yeah, Kaz Jordan as well. Like it's just, you just got to make the most of it. Life's so short.
Now, I'm not sure how familiar you are with like non-Australian wrestling scenes. I mean, obviously WWE and like the main companies, but who are some competitors outside of the Australian indies that you're eyeing to work with someday?
Oh, that's a tough one. I've got too many on my list. Oh, I'd love to like ultimate dream match. Tony Storm would be one. Like,
Yeah. I mean, Grand
yeah,
Slam
Tony.
Australia, like they just had that big of Harley Cameron too as well. They just had that
I
big
know.
event. Yeah.
I know, and I think they've got World Series wrestling coming about as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so that'll be good. Yeah, it's hard because yeah, there's so many like amazing talent out there, but at the same time, I'm just happy in my little bubble in Perth.
That's fair. So I'm so curious too, before we were talking about inspirations, I want to talk about
Mhm.
inspirations when it comes to ring gear because it's obviously a big part of your identity, your look. So what would you say are your go-to sources of inspo when you're crafting or envisioning your ring gear?
Um, I just like things that are out of the ordinary. So like leopard print, I just love because it's that
I can
1950s
tell.
vibe, it's
Yeah.
sensual. But yeah, my all-time favorite movie from all time is like Grease. So a lot of my envision for gear is that sort of like 1950s look, like, but translated into wrestling because obviously
Yeah.
it can't wear. But like Olivia Newton-John when she turned, like the bad girl with
Yeah.
the leather jacket, like that sort of like punky sort of look. I just try to do something different, and I like a lot of sparkles and glitter, but yeah.
Go big or go home. It's a performance. There's a performance aspect to it. So, that's the beauty of I mean, I guess technically you can do it wherever, but that's a beauty of pro wrestling. You have so much freedom when it comes to your look, especially on the indies. Like the creativity is there.
Yeah, and you know what? Like I look on like our current roster for women, and everyone's got this so like different, unique style and
Hmm.
flair. Like Lizzie Maximus, oh my God,
Yeah.
her gear,
Very
love it.
colorful. Yeah.
Yeah, very colorful. I was like standing next to her, and I was like, oh, we're like Glinda and Elphaba.
Sometimes you need that yin and yang though. The opposites attract, it makes
Yeah,
things interesting.
yeah, and then like Stella Nick, she's always been with the stars, like
Absolutely.
you know. And
Yeah,
Harley Hyde, she just has her look.
yeah. You mentioned Grease as an inspiration. What are your other favorite films or television shows like of all time?
I love Friends.
Hmm.
Absolutely love Friends. Another good movie that I do love is Pearl Harbor. So back to the sort of like 1950s,
Hmm.
60s. I really love like war films. I'm a big nerd when it comes to war films. Just love history and just seeing like someone else's point of view of how true life events happened
Hmm.
and how it translates and yeah.
Two more questions for you. You mentioned history being one of them. And I know mentioned you had kind of pursued to potentially being a veterinarian. It didn't work out, but here you are. You're a pro wrestler. Here we are having this chat today. What are your other interests or passions outside of the wrestling realm? You mentioned history is one of them, of course.
Yes, so I like going to like museums and stuff like that, learning about like different cultures. I'm heavy on the gym, love the gym. Outside of pro wrestling, I pretty much do that, like just gym, read up on like weird, um, weird facts. I don't know. I love cooking as well. Cooking's good.
I can't cook for shit. So, like, I admire anybody that can. I'm just a microwave and a toaster and a bowl of cereal kind of girl. That's all I can do.
That's all right. It's life's so busy sometimes, and you know what? Like my
Or
go-to
just
meal,
order in, honestly. Just
Uber
have it
Eats. Yeah.
delivered. Dude, I Uber Eats, Grub. I don't know. It might be something different. We have a thing called Grubhub here, and like DoorDash. It's like all the same thing, but like I am
Yeah.
guilty. Like the amount of money it's not good.
Just disappears.
Yeah, that's awesome though. Like I mean, the gym though too. I mean, you kind of like wrestling. You're always got to be physical, in shape. I admire pro wrestling so much because I truthfully could never step into a ring. So I admire you, and I admire everybody who puts their bodies on the line for entertainment and all of that. And obviously, the escapism is there. So I would just want to say thank you, by the way, too. Um,
Thank you
Now,
for like supporting us.
of course. Now, finally, I noticed you have some tattoos. I know you got one on your leg, your side, your arm. Your arm might be the easiest one to show since we're here. But tell me about the tattoo. Oh, you got multiple. Okay, tell me about
Yeah,
these
I've got
tattoos on your arms.
so this I actually do have a matching tattoo with Lizzie Maximus.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we're both born in July, and this is our birth flower constellation and like I guess planet. So we're
Okay.
both Cancers. And she is someone that I've trained since I first started. So
Yeah.
yeah, she's like my ride or die, but I refer to her as like my little sister. Um, but yeah, so that's our little matching tattoo we have together. And then I've got another one on my wrist here.
Oh, it's a flower. That's so cute. And there's like a little, what's it? Oh, it's this little saying built into it. Okay.
Um, it says "Be good."
I love that.
So that one's a really sentimental one, because when my grandma passed away,
Mhm.
it was sort of like I guess, memory to keep them alive, when I wrestle.
Yeah.
Um, my grandpa used to serve in the war. So that's a poppy, the flower, and Be Good was the last thing that she said to me before she passed away. So having it on my left wrist, yeah, it's just like every time that I lock up with someone or, they're there
Yeah.
with me. So
Yeah, it's like a little reminder and all of that. I love that.
yeah, yeah, they're like just always with me. And I think like as well, like every time that, I go onto the like show or like perform, everyone says be good and I'm like always.
Are you a troublemaker?
No, not at all.
We're all our own little troublemakers in some form or fashion, but I get it. That's a good reminder too in life. And I feel like that's a good like pick me up. Like, because like in anything you do, there's gonna be good days and bad days and doubts, like you said. I feel like that's a good kind of like physical reminder of maybe helps like uplift you a little bit.
Yeah, like it's just yeah, something that, you know, I just look at and I think if I'm having a down day, like that's there, like they're with me always. But it's just yeah, sometimes you get so caught up in life and when the things like start adding up, it's like okay, you just need that
Yeah.
one thing that reminds you of someone that you love.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, you're all good.
Yeah. And it seems like we said you have a good support system too. So especially, I know
Yeah.
you've talked about before, I mean, it's a physical, but like the mental aspect too of it too, is probably a lot at some points. But you have that physical reminder, like you said, and you have a great support system. So it seems like you got a good head on your shoulders, as they say.
Yeah, well, that's it. You mean you surround yourself with good people at the end of the day that want to lift you up and tear you down. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And it is Women's History Month. So shout out to all of the aforementioned women that we've talked about here today. But Layla, before we let you go, please let the listeners know where they can find you online and support you.
so if you want to follow me on Instagram, it is ldivine.pw underscore. I wrestle with Southern Territory Wrestling as well as ESPW, PW, EPW, and HPW. Oh, and you know what? Dude, where's my ring? Because I still help out there. So, you know,
Yes, Layla, it's amazing how far you've come from a personal assistant to now a champion. So you should be
I know.
very proud. You should
Thank you. I
thank
am.
you. Thank you so much for joining me here today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me.